How can you live on a spring-fed lake and still enjoy the salty ocean waves at the beach? Welcome to the Orlando Real Estate Lifestyle, where we explore the intersection of Orlando real estate and your best life. I'm Phil Kruse, here to help you make the most out of your journey in the city beautiful. Why is Orlando the best city in the US? Well, before we get into that and into beaches, imagine that you live in a good suburb in Miami, just like I grew up in. Everyone considers Miami a beach town. I grew up in Kendall, one of the nicest areas now in Orlando that isn't, in Miami, that isn't exactly on the beach. Imagine you live there. You live in a beach town. You live in Miami. How long is it going to take you to get to the beach when your friends come in town and family comes in town to visit? The closest beach really is Key Biscayne and or South Beach. And from Kendall, you're talking at least 45 minutes drive, probably closer to an hour with traffic. And there is always traffic. And you know what? It's even worse than it was when I lived there. So it could be even longer. A lot of the coastline in Miami isn't beach. It's just raw coastline. Same with if you go down to the Florida Keys, it's just raw coastline. There's no real natural beaches. So living in Miami, you're not really living in a beach town unless you're willing to drive 45 minutes or an hour. Well, how about Orlando? Today we're going to be discussing the best beaches in Orlando. And when I say in Orlando, I mean close to Orlando. Because here's the thing. Most of the beaches are only an hour drive from Orlando, just like if you were living in Miami. So as I teased at the beginning, you can have your cake and eat it too by living on the lake and having access to the beach. But before we get into the details about which beaches are the best and closest to Orlando and all that, don't forget, I am a real estate agent. And one of my main lead sources are listeners like you. So when it's your time to make a major real estate decision, think of me, Phil Kruse. That's Kruse with a K. When you're having a beer or a glass of wine with your friend or your family member and they're looking to move to Orlando or they need to make a real estate move like selling their house or buying a house here, point it my way. I'm a listing specialist. Look, real estate transactions don't have to be hard or stressful if you work with the right pro. Work with me. I can sell your house fast and at the highest price. It's called the auction effect that I use. I have an entire podcast episode devoted to that. So jump on your podcast platform, subscribe to my podcast so you get the notifications every Monday morning when my new episodes drop. They're pretty short and quick usually. 5-star review would help me out a lot. And copy the link and send it to a friend via text or post it on social media. Of course, I'm all over social media. Just Google me, Phil Kruse, that's Kruse with a K, Kruse, Instagram @_Phil Kruse. Again, that's Kruse with a K. Picture you and your family and your friends enjoying an amazing lake day in Orlando. Maybe you live on a lake, or maybe you have dreams too. I live on a lake. It's amazing, and I can help you acquire a lake house. But maybe you have friends. There's more lakes in the city of Orlando per square mile than pretty much any other city in the United States. It's one of the many reasons Orlando is so amazing. So imagine you're there, you're having a lake day, your kids are getting pulled on the tube, you're having a cold beer, and the very next day, you and your family pack up your SUV and you drive an hour to the beach. Only an hour. You go in the morning, you can spend all day at the beach, head back to Orlando in the mid-afternoon or evening, and man, you've just had an amazing weekend going to the beach. This is what makes Orlando so great. So what are Orlando's closest beaches? How can you achieve that dream of playing on the lake and then playing in the ocean all in the same weekend? The closest beach to Orlando is Coco Beach. I live right near downtown Orlando. For me to get to Coco Beach, I'm in the south part of Orlando. It takes me about an hour and 15 minutes. If you live on the east side of Orlando, you can be in Coco Beach in 45 minutes. So let's just say it takes roughly an hour for you to get from Orlando to Coco Beach. Coco Beach is amazing. It's where I went during my college years and when I was single in my 20s, partying at Coconuts. You guys listening out there know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Coconuts is the bomb. Coconuts is on Minuteman Causeway. It's a beachfront bar restaurant with live music. It's one of the key draws in Coco Beach. They've invested tons of money in Cocoa Beach here recently to transform their little downtown area so it's much more walkable. There's a lot more shops and restaurants. You got to check out the Big Kahuna, great restaurant right there next to Coconuts. You got to check out the Fat Snook. It's amazing. These are fine dining restaurants. There's also a great jazz club there. So many great things to do. And of course, it's a beautiful beach. That's where Kelly Slater is from, one of the world's most famous surfers. He grew up in Cocoa Beach. The surfing there is great. You have Port Canaveral. So you have the cruises. That's where the Disney cruises come out of. This is only an hour from Orlando, okay? You can watch the rocket launches. So you have the Space Coast right there with Kennedy Space Center, and they're shooting rockets off all the time, especially thanks to SpaceX. So you can be out there with your family if you time it right, be on the beach with your kids, and imagine, hey, little Billy, little Jane, look over here, and there's a rocket taking off. I mean, that is just something that's once in a lifetime for most people, and for us, it's just another day at the beach. Now you like that, right? Okay. The next closest beach that I love is New Smyrna Beach. It's just north of Cocoa Beach, but you got to go around the Space Center and all that. So really, you're going to have to take I-4 north and cut over on State Road 46, and that's going to get you to New Smyrna Beach. To me, the key standout for New Smyrna Beach, especially as it compares to Cocoa Beach, is that you can drive on the beach. Now, you better get there early because the beach access via car actually closes when they fill up. But as long as you're there before, 10 or 10:30, maybe even 11, you can drive on the beach. You don't have to lug your stuff from the car, the parking lot. You can just open the tailgate or just open your cars and bang, all your beach stuff is right out there. And the tide is so cool. Low tide at New Smyrna Beach is very dramatic. It seems to go on forever, especially if you're a kid. Imagine your kids out there looking at this ocean that's fairly close to them, and then a few hours later, it feels like it's a mile away, and it's perfectly flat. And it creates these natural pools that your kids can play in and you can play in it. And it's hard packed and it's doesn't get hot because it maintains the moisture from the tide being going down. So it's just so cool. Great for games like bocce ball and croquet and things like that. I absolutely love New Smyrna Beach, and New Smyrna Beach has a great nightlife. Cocoa Beach, its nightlife is more spread out. In New Smyrna Beach, you have Flagler Avenue. Think about Duval Street in Key West. You've been there. I know you have, right? Spring break? Okay. Flagler Street has that Key West vibe, that laid back, hippie, kind of 1950s fisherman, Ernest Hemingway vibe. That's Flagler. And it closes down at night. It's totally walkable. Great bars and restaurants. You got to check out the Garlic is a great restaurant there in New Smyrna Beach. And of course, Cocoa Beach and New Smyrna Beach and all these beaches on the East Coast have access to the Gulf Stream, meaning where the big fish are: tuna, mahi, sailfish, and swordfish, things like that. So great fishing, and of course you have the Indian River Lagoon in that area for fishing as well. One quick kind of ominous fact, I guess you could say, about New Smyrna Beach is it's actually the shark bite capital of the world. Look, New Smyrna Beach has great surf, but it's really murky and it kicks up the water, so the sharks get confused when they're trying to feed and they accidentally bite people splashing. Now, don't worry, people don't die. They're smaller sharks, so it's kind of a misconception, and it's not that much. You're more statistically likely to get struck by lightning than you are to get bit by a shark, but it is an interesting fact. Just to the north of New Smyrna Beach is arguably the most famous of all the beaches on the East Coast that are easily accessible from Orlando, and that would be Daytona Beach. Right? You got obviously the Daytona Beach International Speedway, the Daytona 500. This is where NASCAR started during the Prohibition era, right there on in Daytona Beach. They used to actually hold the Daytona 500 on the beach. Imagine that. And yes, as that implies, you can also drive on the beach in Daytona. It's just head north of I-4. I-4 essentially dead ends into Daytona Beach, and you are there. So we have great access within an hour's drive of 3 amazing beaches, each with their own vibe. You can go on a staycation. That's another great thing to do if you live in Orlando. I mean, we have staycations with Disney and all the great resorts and hotels that are nearby, but then you got all these beaches where you could just stay for a night if you don't feel like driving back in the evening. Wake up in the morning, bang. You can have breakfast at home. It's amazing. Now, here's the really fun part about Orlando's beaches. And I say Orlando's beaches because they are our beaches. It's what we have access to. Is that we have a second coast. We have a West Coast. I haven't even talked about the West Coast beaches. If you live in Miami, you only have South Beach, Crandon Park, and Key Biscayne, and a handful of other beach access points there. That's it. Miami Beach, right? That's it. You don't get to go to the West Coast. You got to drive through the Everglades and up the coast to get to any of these beaches. I'm talking 4 hours to get to Naples from Miami. Forget it. If you're in Orlando, you can drive an hour and a half to Tampa and make another half hour to get to St. Pete, Clearwater. Now, yes, you do have to deal with I-4, but keep in mind the Brightline train that currently connects Orlando to Miami with a 3-hour high-speed rail trip, not fighting any traffic. You can work, you can hang out, you can have a cocktail. That same train system is going to be connecting Orlando to Tampa. So you could potentially take the train and then take an Uber or something to Clearwater Beach. So St. Pete Clearwater is about 30 minutes south of Tampa. The cool thing about the West Coast beaches is instead of having the Atlantic Ocean with a lot of wave action, hence why we have famous surfers that come from these beaches on the East Coast. On the West Coast, you have the Gulf of Mexico. You don't have a huge current system that is pushing waves into the coast. So you have a very moderate surf. You really don't have any waves. The only way you can surf on the west coast of Florida is if there's a hurricane or a major storm offshore pushing in waves. So you go to these beaches, you have calm waves. You're less stressed about the kids playing in the surf, in the sand. If you go to St. Pete, Clearwater, the sand, and all the beaches here on the west coast, it's a different type of sand because of the natural phenomena, just like the geology of the area. The sand is made of quartz in most cases. Now, yes, there are a lot of crushed up shells, and there are lots of beaches there where you can find shark's teeth. Two amazing aspects. And depending on which beach you are on the West Coast, those are great things. But in Clearwater specifically, the sand is made of quartz. Quartz is a crystal, right? But the special thing about quartz is it doesn't hold heat, okay? It just dissipates heat. So the sun can shine down on it, beat down on this sugar white sand. You hear that sugar sand. This is where we get that expression from. It looks like sugar. It's super fine grain, but it doesn't hold the heat. So when you walk onto this sand, it's this phenomenon. It could be 90 degrees outside. You're hot. You walk on the sand and it actually is pulling the heat away from your feet, and it feels so nice and cooling. It is such a cool phenomena, a totally different experience than the East Coast beaches. Now, Clearwater and St. Pete are completely exploding from a real estate perspective, especially St. Pete, just because the home prices were below where they should have been for such a long time. But if you want to go there and still have kind of infrastructure, have more of a larger city feel, but still have these beautiful beaches, that's St. Pete, that's Clearwater. St. Pete, Clearwater, and the other beaches as you move south are all part of a barrier island system, just a natural way that Florida formed. Same with Coco Beach. Coco Beach and those beaches are a barrier island. You always have to cross the rivers and the intercoastal system to get to these beaches. St. Pete, Clearwater, and these West Coast beaches are the same way. It's a little more space in between, but they're beautiful. So you have both sides. You can watch the sunset and the sunrise, right? If you're in the East Coast, you're only getting the sunrise, okay? And then you go to the river, and you may be able to see a good sunset. You go in Clearwater, you can literally, in certain areas of Clearwater, you can be on one side, watch and see the sunset, and the very next day you can walk across the street and go see the sunset. It's completely amazing. As we move south, you have Indian Rocks Beach. There's so many beaches. Again, only 2 hours. Just another beach town, another feel. But my favorite West Coast beach, without a doubt, is Anna Maria Island. If you go another 30 minutes south, below St. Pete, Clearwater, you get to a different system of barrier islands. The northmost barrier island is known as Anna Maria Beach. It is absolutely gorgeous. Just the shape of it and the fact that it has a northern point and the way the water goes around, it has just created this amazing, just beaches everywhere. It's just unbroken miles and miles of sugar sand. Plus, it's an awesome beach town with lots of cottages and cool condos and different Airbnbs you can rent. And there's Bean Point, which is the very northern tip of Anna Maria Island. It is an awesome place to be. So many public beaches, so many private beaches that you have access to from your own rental. I highly recommend going and staying at Anna Maria Beach. There, I would suggest you go and you rent something. Now you're talking a 2.5 hour drive. You can do it from Orlando, but it might be worth it staying. As you continue going south down this chain of barrier islands, you have Lido Key, you have Longboat Key. These keys, all right, they're called keys because the Spaniards used the word key or K as island. Okay, so we kept some of that Spanish nomenclature and we call them keys. So you have Longboat Key, You have Siesta Key, and then you have I teased it already. You have Siesta Key. Siesta Key is amazing. It's another standout, kind of like Anna Maria Island. It's just something special about the sand and the infrastructure down there. I've been there for my wife's volleyball tournaments. We've stayed. It's such a nice tourist area with great restaurants and shopping. You gotta go check out Siesta Key. And don't forget, on the west coast is Tampa, like I said, but you also have the port of Tampa and Tampa International Airport. So you can be in Orlando. You have access to the East Coast beaches in Port Canaveral over there where the Disney cruises are, and Royal Caribbean and all the other cruises, so you can cruise from there. Or if it's better, if you want to go cruise to Mexico or another part of the Caribbean, you can go to the port of Tampa, and you're talking only an hour and a half drive. Hour drive one direction for the cruises, and hour and a half for another slate of cruises. Or if you're doing international travel, it's unlikely because Orlando has the biggest airport in the state of Florida and is the #1 most visited city in the United States. So it's unlikely that this will happen, but there is a possibility that Tampa might have more favorable flights. Typically what happens actually, those poor saps living in Tampa, yeah, I know some of you listening out there are them. Maybe it's you, right? You guys got to drive into Orlando to use our airport. Our airport's not landlocked in downtown Tampa, and therefore make it a fairly small airport. Our Orlando airport is huge. We have more land to build, and we just built a third cruise terminal. And of course, all the trains, the one connecting to Miami, the one connecting to Tampa, and eventually it'll connect to Jacksonville, they all come into our airport. We're so lucky. Orlando's the best. Can you imagine? Can you see yourself making that drive down the 528, which got changed to the beach line, right? To market the fact that Orlando is so close to the beaches. Can you imagine you and your family driving down there, having an amazing day at Coco Beach, listening to the live music, eating some coconut shrimp, right? Digging holes and letting your kids play in the sand while you enjoy an ice cold beer. It's amazing. Go get ice cream at the Fat Donkey, get the babysitter, go have a nice dinner at the Fat Snook. Look, if you have any questions about any of these beaches or anything about Orlando, you're not going to find a bigger Orlando advocate than me right here. Hit me up. I'm all over social media. You can find me on the internet, obviously. Google me, Phil Kruse. That's Kruse with a K, Kruse. Go on my Instagram, @_Phil Kruse. That's Kruse with a K. Hit me up for my real estate services. I am a listing specialist. I will get your home sold fast and at the highest price. And while we're at it, we're going to find you a new home, and we're going to make that process easier. I know all the strategies to manage today's crazy real estate market. It is a seller's market. So if you're looking to buy, you need to have creative strategies to make you stand out above all the other buyers that are trying to buy that same home that you like. Yes, there are still bidding wars. Yes, we're still seeing prices going over list. And yes, we're still seeing homes go off the market in the very first weekend. Oh, and I can help you buy a beach house too. I just put a condo in New Smyrna Beach under contract with a buyer. I'm so blessed to be able to work with these people. They're amazing. Hit me up. And if you have any questions about Orlando, what you want to do, weekend plans come out every Friday on my social media feeds. Check them out. I got the plans for you in Orlando. And always know that your best life in Orlando is within reach. Keep embracing every moment. Cheers.